right, so getting back to Chapter 7, let's look at Handout 7B. Now, Handout 7B is going to be some extra info about our vertebral column. So, first of all, we did learn the main structures of the vertebral column. But what we didn't learn to start off with is that we've got several structures that make up the bone that goes around the spinal cord. Remember, our vertebral or spinal foramen. So we've got this bone that's going to wrap around and form this vertebral foramen. The body is something that we learned in lab. And then the area between the body and our transverse processes is called the pedicel. So we've got our body, a pedicel, then we have a transverse process. Then between the transverse process and the spinal process or spinous process, we have a structure called the lamina. So the way that our vertebrae are made, we have the body, a pedicel, a lamina, and then another pedicel. That infuses and forms this vertebral or spinal foramen. All right? Now, remember the functions of our spinal column. This class lecture is all about function. So it's going to support the weight of our head and trunk. It protects our spinal cord. It allows spinal nerves to exit the spinal cord through those intervertebral foramen. It's where muscles can attach. That's why we've got all these processes. So your spinal process and your transverse processes are where muscles and ribs are going to attach. And then it says it permits the movement of our head and trunk. So this bone structure of the pedicel and lamina is going to enclose our spinal cord. All right? And of course, if we look at the pedicel and lamina, it forms our vertebral foramen. So I just had that written there. Now, why is that important? Well, I want to go to our PowerPoint and talk a little bit about herniated discs. All right? So a herniated disc is, I'm sorry, I don't want to go over herniated discs yet. I'm going to skip that for just a moment and talk about the next slide. These slides are out of order, I apologize. Let's talk about a disease called spina bifida. Spina bifida is a birth defect. Children are born with this disorder, and it's caused by an incomplete closure of those pedicel and lamina around the spinal cord. So it says the vertebrae are not fully formed and remain unfused and open. Now, this can lead to severe disabilities because this spinal cord can protrude out of the opening that should be enclosed. And often a baby will have a fluid-filled sac that surrounds the spinal cord. Now, when the spinal cord protrudes out of this opening, it can cause damage to the spinal cord. And so there's a big array of severity when it comes to spina bifida. I'm not going to have you memorize the different kinds of spina bifida, but they vary widely in severity from being asymptomatic all the way to complete paralysis below the injured area. And so what happens is we get this spinal cord protruding out and becoming damaged. And I have a video there's a link to a video that will talk about spina bifida. And you really need to watch that video because it is part of the class. So don't blow it off. It's a really well-made video that'll talk about spina bifida. There's no cure for spina bifida. Treatment usually involves some type of surgery to enclose that spinal cord back into the vertebrae. An interesting thing is it says folic acid, this nutrient folic acid, taken by women who may become pregnant, seems to be a key to prevention. The trick to this is women that are taking folic acid before they become pregnant is where it seems to help. Women that become pregnant, learn about their pregnancy, and then start taking folic acid, that doesn't seem to help a whole lot. So the key is to be taking folic acid prior to becoming pregnant. So many doctors will recommend that women of childbearing age should be taking a folic acid supplement in case they become pregnant. That will help guard against this disease, spina bifida. And so spina bifida is this failure of the pedicellin lamina to enclose the spinal cord. Watch that video and you'll be in really good shape when it comes to understanding this a little bit more. So pretty simple. That is the first part of Handout 7-8B. The second one is going to look at a herniated disc, which I prematurely jumped into there a few minutes ago. So if we look down at the bottom of this handout, you're going to see that the vertebrae are separated by this intervertebral disc. Now, we learned this in lab, but we didn't learn anything about the intervertebral disc. We just named them. They are a strip of cartilage between each body of the vertebrae. The intervertebral disc is actually made out of two parts. It's kind of like a jelly donut. So the jelly part is this middle portion called the nucleus pulposus. The donut part of the jelly donut is called the annulus fibrosus. So it consists of this outer annulus fibrosus and this center nucleus pulposus. Now, what can happen to the intervertebral discs is something known as a herniated disc. So if we go back up one slide, it talks a little bit about herniated discs. Herniated discs are where the intervertebral disc becomes damaged. So it says it's misleadingly called a slipped disc. You shouldn't call it a slipped disc because that implies that you slip a disc out of place and that you could just slip it back in place, like a chiropractor could do that. That is not what happens. What happens is with this picture. So this inner jelly called the nucleus pulposus can bulge out due to injury. And that bulge can put pressure on nerves, or this outer ring of annulus fibrosus can completely tear, and the nucleus pulposus, like you're stepping on the jelly donut, it can get squeezed and extruded out. This can cause a lot of pain because the disc collapses and your two vertebrae may be rubbing on one another, and all of this material can start pushing on the nerve and cause lots of pain. So it says it's a tear in the outer fibrous annulus fibrosus ring, and that allows the soft jelly nucleus pulposus to bulge out or completely push out. Now this can occur due to general wear and tear of growing older, but it's usually caused by trauma. someone dropping and compressing their vertebrae and herniating a disc. Diseases can also deteriorate the cartilage of your intervertebral discs and cause a herniated disc. Kind of interesting is smoking is a risk factor for this. What it does is smoking is a systemic problem. It's not just your lungs. So when you're thinking about cigarette smoke, don't just think about your lungs, but think about this as being a complete systemic issue. And so what happens is the cigarette smoke diminishes nutrient delivery to areas like your intervertebral discs. So this weakens them. So when an injury does occur, you're more likely as a smoker to get a herniated disc. Smoking doesn't cause a herniated disc, but it can contribute to one because we're not getting the proper oxygen. Okay, so that's kind of interesting, kind of cool. So this intervertebral disc is cartilage in between the bodies of each vertebrae. If they get compressed and damaged, we call that a herniated disc. I'll let you watch that movie, short little video about herniated discs, and then we're ready to move on. So have a good day, and I'll see you in the next video.